So I'm hoping someone can explain to me where in this race I used up all my rear tires, because this race went pretty well, um, but in both of my stints, each one's 4 laps, I completely killed my rear tires by the end of each stint. The race is an hour long, so it's 8 laps around the Nordschleife, but I've done races where, something happens, I have to pit early, so I have to do 50 minutes or 7 laps on one set of tires, and knowing that, I sort of drive conservatively. I target sort of 8 minute, 25, 26, 27 second range. So I drive a bit conservatively, and my tires last till the end, or the end of a 7 lap stint, which is about 50 minutes. So I don't know why I can't do 4 laps when I'm going very quickly. I mean, obviously it makes sense, but I'm trying to figure out where exactly I killed my tires, because this race went pretty well. But by the end of the race, I have a battle with the blue Lamborghini, who's just ahead of me now. He's in P9. So I have a really good battle with him, but it's clear that he just saved his tires and was able to fight me a lot at the end. And the only reason I managed to stay ahead at the end was because he seemed to have a higher downforce setup, so his straight line speed wasn't as high as mine. That's the only thing that saved me, and it makes sense that, he saved his tires because he has a higher downforce setup. But I also want to know where I killed my tires. So this race went pretty well overall. I'm just trying to stay out of trouble. Started P10 or P11. So I'm currently not defending, I'm just trying to sort of keep in the slipstream range of the GT2 car ahead of me. Hats off to him, by the way, he outpaced me in a slower car, so this guy is really good. C Hispania. So I'm trying to stay close to him and at the same time get away from the 2 cars fighting behind me, the Ferrari and the BMW. And what I'm monitoring now is I'm monitoring the time gap to the car ahead and the car behind. So across the last sector, I'm 0.9 of a second behind the yellow Mercedes in front of me. And I'm 1 second ahead of the Ferrari behind me. But I can also see that from that time gap, the gap between that Ferrari and that BMW are 0.4 of a second, so they're very close to each other. If I look at camera here, you can see those two very close to each other, so they're probably fighting. Which for me is good, because when you're in a fight, you're always slower. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I can put my head down, I can try to keep up with the guys ahead of me. I shouldn't have to worry too much about the guys behind me keeping up because they're fighting each other. So coming near the end of the first lap now, the yellow Merc ahead of me takes off. Those GT2 cars have more power than GT3 cars, and they have less downforce, so they can take off in the straights. They shouldn't be as quick in the corners, but on the straights they can really take off. So I understand why the GT2 car ahead of me is getting away. And then looking behind me, those two are still fighting. So I'm kind of running on my own here. I can sort of put my head down, try to not make any mistakes, keep good pace, try not to slide, try not to kill my tires. So at the start of the second lap here, I'm 3.5, almost 4 seconds away from the car ahead. So I'm definitely losing touch with those guys. Still 1 second ahead of the car behind, but again, I'm looking at that gap. 0.3 of a second between P11 and P12, so even while I'm racing, I can't see them behind me very well, but I know they're fighting because I can see that time gap. And that time gap updates every time sector. So there are certain checkpoints around the track, and when one car goes past, it measures the time between one car and then the next car that goes past that exact point. It measures that time, and that's how you gauge distance. And obviously watching the replay, I can see how close they are. So they're fighting really hard, and so they're not taking optimal lines. I should be able to get away. Crossing the next time sector later in that lap, I can see that now I've gained almost 0.8 of a second away from the car behind me. So I'm definitely losing them a little bit, not because I'm necessarily driving really well, but because they're fighting each other. The gap between them is still 0.3 of a second, so this is what I see when I'm racing. I'm not necessarily looking in my mirror a lot, but I can see that time gap and I know that they're fighting. So during this time I'm thinking, try to get away. At this point I look in my mirror and I can see that the BMW that was behind now overtaken the Ferrari. So the Ferrari's dropped off a bit, sort of falling behind. And now I'm looking in my rearview mirror to see if that BMW is catching me. But more than the mirror, I'm actually just looking at the time gap to see if that 1.797 shrinks across the next time sector. That would tell me whether or not he's catching up, whether or not I need to start worrying about defending, giving him the slipstream. And then if I decide that he's clearly faster than me, that determines how much of a fight I put up, because I know he's going to overtake me anyway because he's a better driver, and there's no point fighting it too much or seeing a collision, using up my tires. So I'm monitoring, and I'm also trying to see where in the lap I'm quicker and where he's quicker. I know one of my weaknesses is this part right here, the carousel, and I look in my mirror and he's right up on me, so he gains, I don't know, see, he gains 0.7 of a second just in that one corner. And he's right up on me now, so now I'm definitely thinking defensive. So I'm watching him closely now, trying to see if he's going to make a dive or an aggressive move. He's very close to me now, and you can see that he's high beaming me. So he's trying to tell me either that he's just trying to intimidate me or he's going to go for a move, but luckily he actually makes a mistake, goes off into the wall. That's a relief for me because he's no longer on me, and he likely has some damage. He maybe damaged his tires a little bit, so now I have some breathing room. I can get back to just focusing on my lines, my fuel, my tires. Doesn't look like that Ferrari is catching me, so I can just put my head down, focus, and try to gain some ground. as we cross the line into lap 3, you can see that the Ferrari now is 2 seconds behind me, and now I'm monitoring that gap over the next lap to see, am I losing him or is he gaining? Now that we've crossed into the next time sector, I check the gap again, and I see that I've gained maybe a second and a bit over the Ferrari behind me. So that's a bit reassuring. I know that my pace is fine. I just have to not make mistakes. But I'm pushing very hard because I want to catch the GT2 car ahead of me. I see that he's only a second and a half ahead of me. So I start pushing, and somewhere during this push, I use up my tires, but I don't know where. So if anyone can tell me. Now the other thing I'm noticing is that, yeah, the Ferrari behind is 3 and a bit seconds behind me, but the BMW, who went off track, got a bit of damage, has come back and is only 1.6 seconds behind the Ferrari. So he's catching us. That's not good news for me because it tells me that he's fast enough to just bring back a gap like that. And even more discouraging for me is that he's doing it while he probably has damage. So now I'm thinking, how fast is he that he can catch up to us within less than a lap while having damage? So he clearly has really good pace. And while I'm thinking about that, looking ahead at the gap, I'm 11 seconds away from the GT2 car. But at this point I get a yellow flag. I don't know what it is, but then right around this corner, which is YouTube corner, I see that the Lamborghini has spun out. So I gain a position. So that's the Lamborghini that was in P7, Kruger. So he spun out. Probably has some damage. Maybe got a flat spot on his tires or something. So I'm thinking, if I can keep good pace, then maybe I can maintain this position ahead of someone who qualified ahead of me. So I'm thinking this guy has more pace than I do, but maybe I can keep this position if I drive really well. So again, I'm pushing really hard. I'm using my tires without knowing it until it becomes very clear on the next lap before I do my pit stop. And again, at the very last lap of the race, I go in for, again at the very last lap of this race, I fight them. We have a really good battle. But the reason we have a really good battle, the reason he comes back, is because he manages his tires, and on the last lap I'm sliding all over the place at significantly less pace because my rear tires are dead. So I'm really trying to find out where did I kill my tires. Now going into this time sector, I see something that really discourages me. The BMW that was chasing me, the white BMW that went off, probably has some damage, has regained the position over the Ferrari and is now probably hunting me down. So again, that's a very worrying thing because clearly my pace is not fast enough to get away from these guys, and the Ferrari's pace was really not good enough to keep the BMW behind. So at this point I'm trying to push really hard so that I have a really good pit stop, really good outlap, and even if he's faster, I can that 3.7, 3.6 seconds that he's behind me, if he can only take away half a second each lap, then he can't overtake me over the next 4 laps till the end of the race. So I'm okay with him being faster than me as long as it's not fast enough for him to A, catch up to me, which is one battle, but overtaking me on such a tight track is another battle. So now I come in for my pit stop. My tires weren't too bad at the end of this stint, but I'm very aware of that BMW behind me. Now, I'm not quite sure how this happened. I can only assume that he didn't change his tires, but the BMW that was behind me when we went into the pits left the pits ahead of me by around 5 seconds, which I think means he didn't change his tires at all. So on one hand, it's annoying that he's ahead of me. On the other, I assume he didn't change his tires. So I assume that I should have more pace than him. So yeah, he's ahead of me now, but at this point I'm thinking I should be able to catch him. But between me and that BMW, there's the Audi of Meyer, who, as you can see on the left, started the last lap in P14 across the last time sector because he took his pit stop a lap earlier than we did, and now has caught up and he undercut me in the pit stop, which means he took his pit stop a lap early, so I overtook him, but he did a really fast lap so that by the time I went in and did my pit stop, he overtook me again while I was changing my tires and getting fuel. So not only do I have to retake the BMW, but I have to take this Audi first. Now at the moment, during this, I'm not too worried about overtaking the Audi for a few reasons. Firstly, he qualified ahead of me, so that tells me he has more pace than I do. So maybe even on equal tires I can't overtake him because he's just a more skilled driver than I am. On the other hand, his tires are a lap older, so in an 8-lap race, on the last lap, his tires are going to be 5 laps old, mine are going to be 4 laps old. So I'm probably not going to have much of a pace advantage in tires until the end. So I'm really not worried about overtaking him now. But what I'm hoping for is that the Audi catches the BMW and they start fighting. I know that the BMW is driving very aggressively because he went off track trying to overtake me, and I'm assuming he didn't change his tires, so he's struggling a bit for pace is what I imagine is happening. And I'm looking ahead and I can see that the Audi has caught him already. So for me that's a good sign, because if they start fighting, that means they're slowing each other down and I can keep up. Now I'm noticing that even though they're fighting, I'm not catching up to them, which is discouraging at first, but then again around this corner, YouTube corner, I get this view, both of them going into the wall, so there must have been some sort of contact. So I go around them, I gain 2 positions. It seems like they're both pretty heavily damaged, so I didn't get my chance to fight either of them, but I did gain 2 positions. On one hand, that's good news, but then worryingly again, I look behind me, and the blue Lamborghini that spun into the wall earlier has caught up, taken its pit stop, overtaking the Ferrari that was behind me the whole time, and they're now hunting me down. So that's very discouraging. I know that he's faster than me because he qualified significantly higher than me, but now that's something I'm keeping an eye on. The 4.3 seconds to that car behind, I want to maintain that gap and crucially not let him get within 1 second of me coming into this part of the track, which is the long straight. It's called the Dottinger Straight. It's the fastest part of the track. Really long straight. Pretty much max out your car here. So I really don't want to let him get within a second of me here over the next 3 laps. So again, this is another decision I make to push really hard, and again, unknowingly use up my tires, which I then pay for at the end of the race. The last lap, the second half of the last lap, I really struggle. So towards the end of lap 6 now, I'm looking at the gap and I see that it's 2.8 seconds. So he's gained a noticeable amount, not a huge amount, but a significant amount where I'm worrying about him being within the slipstream range coming onto the back straight, which would mean he has an advantage. So I'm seeing this, and I'm starting to feel the pressure here because I have to get away, otherwise he has a significant advantage. This long straight that we're on now is only 2 corners away from the start-finish straight. So if I give him an advantage here on the 8th lap, on the last lap, it's pretty much an invitation for him to overtake me right before the end of the race. So I'm seeing that gap, and this is when I start to feel pressure. I have to push. And I can see that my gap is somewhat being maintained here. Over the last half lap, we're well into lap 7 now. Over the last half of the lap, he only gained 0.2 of a second. My tires haven't really dropped off yet. So it's clear that when my tires are okay, I can maintain that gap. It's only in the next lap when my tires die completely does he gain, because he still has significantly more life in his tires than I do. We'll see that in that last lap, I start to slide a lot in the rear because somehow I've killed my rear tires. So again, if anyone wants to point out where I used up my rear tires, please teach me. So into the last lap now, we're about a third of the way into the last lap. I see that the gap has come down. Whoa, big slide. So yeah, clearly my tires are gone at this point. I'm struggling there too. And the gap that was 1.6 seconds right before I slid right there, it won't update until the next time sector, but it's probably 0.9 of a second now. Just judging roughly how close he is. So in those 2 corners, I slid a lot, lost a lot of time, and now he's right on me. Gap now is probably 0.1, 0.2 seconds, so it's well within my slipstream now, which will help him on the straights, but will hurt him in the corners because his downforce won't work as effectively because the air is already disturbed by my car, so it won't flow over his car as well. But he's right over me now, so I basically have no choice but to be defensive for the rest of this lap, which is, we're still in the first half of this lap. So it's a lot of time for him to make an attack if he wants to. So I'm definitely feeling the pressure now. And what I'm trying to do is claw back a gap of around a second before the main straight at the end of the lap. Otherwise, I'll give him the slipstream, which will be like I'm towing him along, and then he'll just overtake me right before the finish line and take this position. I really do want to finish where I am, P8. P8 in this grid would be a very good result because of how stacked this grid was. But again, I have dead tires, so it really compromises my exit speed. I can't floor it out of a corner like he can. And even my front tires are dying quite a bit because you see here going into the carousel, which is around the halfway point of the lap, I completely understeer and that lets him get completely alongside me. So I lose the banking, I come up too high, he goes in deep. And he's alongside me for a little bit here, so again, he's all over me. Any moment he could make a move. So I'm definitely feeling the pressure. I have to drive very carefully so I don't spin out because of my dead tires, but I also have to be defensive so I don't invite him to make any moves. You can see my car squirming all over the place. I can't put the power down at all, and he's putting a lot of pressure. He's swerving left and right, switching between my left side mirror and my right side mirror, trying to intimidate me into thinking that he'll go for a dive, which is working because I was very scared. So there are only a few corners left until the straight. I haven't managed at all to build a gap again. So now I'm worried I have to try to break the toe somehow, not let him get ahead of me. I go too hard into this corner. I go out wide. He's all over me again. So I have to be defensive into there. And I try to get a good exit, because a good exit will be multiplied down the straight, but he's right on me. There's nothing I can do. At this point, I thought it was over because he's right on me. He has the slipstream, but I'm saved by one thing. It appears that he has a really high downforce setup, which makes sense to why he was able to save his tires, maybe. So he's beside me right now because he sat in my slipstream, but once he pulled out and came beside me, his high downforce slowed him down. I was able to have a higher top speed, and I just managed to stay ahead of him, just barely, only due to that high setup of his. But he had basically won the battle. If we were in equal cars, he would have won at this point. He hits the wall a little bit there, but I'm saved. We cross the line. I finish in P8 or P7, I don't know, which is a good result. I've started in P10 or P11, I don't remember. But yeah, if anyone can tell me where I used my tires, because in that fight, in that last lap, he definitely won that battle. He did everything right. He took all the corners well. He got behind me onto the main straight, which basically won him, or would have won him the battle. If we were in equal downforce cars, he would have sat in my slipstream, gained speed. When he came beside me, he would have just sailed past, got ahead, and finished ahead of me. It was only because of his high downforce that he wasn't able to maintain his high speed once he came out beside me. Because I was on a very low downforce setup, the air wasn't dragging me back or pushing me back as much as it was for him. So that's the only reason I managed to stay ahead. Now, I could have avoided that battle completely if I wasn't sliding and if I had saved my rear tires a little bit. But again, I don't know where I used my tires. So if anyone can tell me, please do.